Oh, guess what's happening today? I don't know if you've heard of this or not. There's this thing, and they call it impeachment. To talk about it, we've had him on the show before, a couple of more visits, and he'll actually be a frequent player. He is the head of the Department of Government at Tarleton State University. He is a columnist, and he is Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, joining us on the Wake Up Call. Doc, thanks for being with us.
Bill and Rob, thanks for having me back.
It is our pleasure. Okay, so the trial begins today. What kind of things are you, as someone who teaches government, politics, what are going to be the nuanced things that you are going to be looking for or watching for that your average person maybe wouldn't pick up on?
Well, there's not going to be much new from the House managers because we've seen them make their case before. What's going to be interesting is the arguments that the Trump team will make, because in the House side, it was the actual Republican representatives in the committees making the case on behalf of the president. But here's the president's actually legal team making their case. So there's going to be some subtleties in terms of that. And then it's hard to, our eyes are on some of the senators who have the key votes that could decide whether or not we have witnesses or whether or not there's a dismissal after both sides make their case. But they have to be silent, so it's kind of hard to keep your eyes on them, although we'll try to be analyzing people like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Romney and Gardner for the whole process because their votes are important.
Considering that the rules for this impeachment are essentially the same as the rules for President Clinton, does it not strike you as somewhat ironic that Senator Chuck Schumer is making such a big deal about the rules when they're the same ones he voted for back during the Clinton administration?
Yeah, I mean, the Constitution itself doesn't outline the rules. The rules are to be determined by the Senate, but because there's not enough Republican votes to give a summary judgment in the president's favor and dismiss that we're going to go through this process, kind of those Clinton rules become the precedent that are embraced. So those rules were supported on both sides when it was Clinton's time. So it's hard to see any legitimate reason why Schumer would claim they're no longer proper here in this trial.
You mentioned witnesses. If you were to give an over-under on whether witnesses were going to be called, what would your odds be?
Well, I could be wrong, but I think we are going to have some witnesses. It's good politics for some of these Republican senators from swing states to say not only were they patient to hear both arguments being made, but they even heard from some witnesses that the House hadn't heard from. And then based on the totality of evidence and their objectivity, they voted not guilty. So I do think we'll see some witnesses. I just don't think there'll be fireworks like some people are assuming. I think it's very likely with the Government Accountability Office's report finally coming out and say that there's a constitutional crisis involved here when the Department of Office and Management and Budget disagrees. So I do think it's maybe possible we get a new witness from the OMB. We only had Mark Sandy from OMB testify in the House process. So someone like Mike Duffy or Robert Fairweather could testify. It just won't be fireworks. It's going to be kind of technical and boring for a lot of people watching or seeing what they testify about.
So you don't think the so-called whistleblower is going to get called?
Well, there's this talk of reciprocity in the process. So if you do get a witness on one side, that they would want another witness on the other side. I think the likelihood of the quote-unquote whistleblower testifying is relatively low, but he would be, there's a shot at him testifying, whereas I don't think there's any chance Hunter Biden or Joe Biden testify. They may need to give testimony in another format at another date, but in terms of this trial, they're probably not going to testify.
What do you think of the president's defense team, in particular, Kenneth Starr?
Well, Ken Starr brings a lot of experience. There haven't been many trials of presidents in the Senate, and one was back in 1868, so no one's around from that. So what's interesting here is the contrast. The House managers are actual representatives in the House of Representatives. amongst the 7 House managers, 6 of them have law degrees, and they're all experienced politicians. But priority one for them is to put on a show for their home district as we head right into primaries. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, the contrast that on one side you have actually active politicians making their case, putting on a show for the home district. On the president's side, you have a professional team designed to win this in an efficient manner. So I think the president's team is going to be an interesting group, and the contrast with the House team is interesting to watch.
Nathaniel Cogley joining us on the wake-up call this morning. Is there any doubt in your mind that, well, actually, before we get to that question, a lot of people are making what I consider to be kind of a false comparison, saying that the Senate is, this jury that is going to decide the fate of the president. They're really not a jury. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Well, they're active senators. They're politicians. They represent the states. It's not a jury like you would have in a courtroom where you're supposed to not know anything about it going in. But they're going to eventually have that vote there. And so on a jury, you also need usually a unanimous, and here 2/3 being the threshold. But they are, in a sense, a jury in this political format. But what's interesting is in a court of law, the jury can sometimes be captive if you're set up for jury duty, and it can take a big chunk of your life out, and you don't really control the timetable. Here's an interesting moment where the jury actually can decide how long it wants to have its life eaten up in this process, And now we see that we have some 12-hour days, and this is very entertaining. They're not allowed to have cell phones or electronic devices with them. They have to be in attendance. And for these senators who are busy people always communicating, this is going to be tough confinement for them to sit through this with no cell phone, and they have the control to end this once they have 51 votes to do so. So it's not a jury in a traditional courtroom sense, but the senators will be silent and take an oath, and they ultimately will have the final vote.
Well, I guess there's probably some people out there going, oh, my God, thank goodness, they're finally going to be silent. And, let's all play the violins because they don't get to have their electronic devices. Really. How long do you think this is going to end up going? It seems like that Mitch McConnell really wants to get this over and done as fast as possible. How much can he actually control that speed of the trial?
Well, he can. So there's some things we haven't seen before. We've never seen impeachment where House and Senate are different parties, and we saw the politics about Pelosi transferring it that we're not used to. Mm-hmm. And then we've also never seen an impeachment where the president and the Senate are the same party. All we have to go on is the Johnson case and the Clinton case. In the Johnson case, that was 2 months plus some days, and in the Clinton case, it was 1 month plus some days, about 5 weeks. So McConnell is speeding this up a little bit, but if we do get some witnesses, he can speed it up to maybe a 4-week trial, where the Clinton trial was 5 weeks. We see some small things like instead of the House managers making 24 hours of case over 3 days, they got to make it over 2 days, and same with the president's team. So he's speeding this up a little bit, and just to efficiently get through this. So I'm suggesting anywhere from a 2 to 4 week trial, depending on the witnesses.
All right. Doc, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Bill and Rob.
All right, you take care. That's Dr. Nathaniel Cogley, head of the Department of Government at Tarleton State University. Love having him on. It is 6:50 Newsradio, 1120 KPNW.